The night shift at Deep Space Monitoring Station Alpha 7 was supposed to be boring. Lieutenant Rebecca Hayes had drawn the graveyard watch for the third time this month, and she was already on her fourth cup of coffee. The vast array of quantum. Receivers hummed quietly around her, scanning the empty void between stars for any sign of intelligent life. For 15 years, humanity had been listening to the cosmos, hoping for that magical moment of first contact. What they got instead was a scream. The signal hit the communication array like a sledgehammer through glass. Rebecca's coffee cup exploded against a metal floor as every screen in the monitoring station erupted with cascading alien symbols. The Universal Distress Beacon, mathematical sequence designed to be recognized by any intelligent species, blazed across her displays in desperate repeating patterns. Her hand shook as she reached for the translation matrix. Come on, she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. After decades of silence, the universe was finally talking back, and it was crying for help. The alien script began converting to English, each word appearing with agonizing slowness. Urgent. Massive attack, slavers, population dying, children taken. Anyone listening, please. Rebecca's blood turned to ice. Children. They were talking about children. The transmission coordinates locked onto her screen. Proxima Sector. 7th. Planet. Every human scout who had ever passed through that region had marked it as dead space, no signals, no energy signatures, nothing but empty rock orbiting a dying star. Except it wasn't empty. An entire civilization had been living there, and now they were being slaughtered. You know what's funny about bureaucracy? It never sleeps. But it sure moves like it's in a coma. Protocol dictated that Rebecca route this discovery through proper channels. First to Sector Command, then to Earth Central, then through a committee of scientists who would debate the authenticity of the signal. For weeks, while an entire species was wiped out, she could already picture the endless meetings, the forums. To fill out, politicians arguing about jurisdiction, while children died light years away. Her finger hovered over the standard communication array, standard procedure, safe procedure, the kind that kept junior officers from making career-ending mistakes. But then another burst of alien text scrolled across her screen. No time. Ships everywhere are taking the young ones. ... Please hurry. Rebecca's hand moved away from the standard array and slammed down on the emergency military channel. Red warning lights bathed the monitoring station as she bypassed every protocol in the book. This is Deep Space Monitor Alpha 7 calling Admiral Marcus Stone aboard the USS Vengeance. Code Black Authorization. We have first contact. And there, under attack, the connection took 15 seconds that felt like 15 hours. When Admiral Stone's face appeared on her screen, Rebecca understood why the man was a legend in the defense fleet. His weathered features bore the scars of 3 decades, fighting pirates and raiders along the Outer Rim. His steel-gray eyes had seen too much death, too much suffering, and they burned with the kind of controlled fury that made enemies reconsider their life choices. Port Lieutenant. Stone's voice cut through the static like a blade. Admiral, I'm receiving a distress signal from Proxima 7. The transmission is alien in origin, but the universal mathematics check out. They're being attacked by slavers, sir. Mass casualties. Population being harvested. Rebecca's voice cracked slightly. They specifically mentioned children being taken. Something shifted in Stone's expression. The professional mask slipped. For just a moment, revealing the father underneath the warrior. His own daughter had been killed in a raider attack on the civilian transport Harmony 5 years ago. The entire defense fleet knew that Admiral Stone had a particular hatred for anyone who targeted the innocent. How long ago did the transmission begin? Stone asked, his voice deadly quiet. 17 minutes ago, sir. The signal is weakening. If we're going to do anything. Rebecca let the sentence hang in the air. Stone was quiet for a moment, and Rebecca could almost hear him calculating distances, fleet positions, political ramifications. The Proxima Sector was technically outside human jurisdiction. Any military action there would be considered an act of war by the Galactic Trade Federation, assuming they even recognized humanity's right to exist. But then Stone did something. That would change the course of human history forever. He smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of expression that made veteran pirates surrender without firing a shot. It was the smile of a man who had just decided that politics could go to hell because someone was hurting children, and that was simply not acceptable. "Lieutenant Hayes," Stone said with deadly calm, "patch me through to Fleet Command." "Authorization, Stone Alfie 7. "Tell them we're implementing the Good Samaritan Protocol." Rebecca's eyes widened. The Good Samaritan Protocol was theoretical. Standing order that allowed defense fleet commanders to render aid to any species under attack, regardless of political considerations. It had been written into military doctrine, but never used, because the situation had never arisen. "Until now, sir. Are you sure?" "The political fallout will be someone else's problem," Stone interrupted. "Prep the entire Outer Rim battle group for immediate hyperspace jump. Combat configuration, and Lieutenant." His eyes hardened to diamond chips. "Tell them we're going to war." The transmission cut out, leaving Rebecca alone with the alien distress signal still scrolling across her screens. What she had just witnessed, the moment humanity stepped onto the galactic stage, not as explorers or diplomats, but as something far more dangerous, as protectors who didn't ask permission to do what was right. The fabric of space itself seemed to tear apart as 18 human warships materialized at the edge of the Proxima 7 system. The hyperspace jump had been flawless, a testament to Admiral Stone's reputation for never leaving anything to chance. But what awaited them in the void was a scene straight from humanity's worst nightmares. Admiral Marcus. Stone stood motionless on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, his weathered hands gripping the command rail as he absorbed the horror unfolding. Before him, through the massive viewports, the blue-green world of Proxima 7 hung like a wounded jewel against the starfield. But it wasn't the planet's beauty that held his attention. It was the three massive alien vessels that orbited it like mechanical vultures. The Scarthok raider ships were obscene in their design. Imagine if someone took a praying mantis, scaled it up to the size of a city, then wrapped it in biomechanical armor that pulsed with sickly green light. These weren't just spacecraft. They were living nightmares, their hulls breathing and flexing as if the ships themselves were predators savoring their feast. "Jesus Christ," whispered Lieutenant Commander Sarah Williams from the navigation station. It was the first time anyone on the bridge had ever heard her swear. Commander David Jackson stepped up beside Stone, his tactical display painting the grim reality in hard numbers. "Admiral, initial scans show 3 heavy raiders Scarthok configuration. They've been here for at least 6 hours, maybe longer." His voice carried the kind of controlled rage that comes from seeing too much suffering. "Sir, they're not just attacking the planet, they're harvesting it." Through the tactical overlay, the bridge crew could see streams of transport pods moving like a deadly conveyor belt between the planet's surface and the raider ships. Each pod carried dozens of terrified beings, women, children torn from their homes and families to feed the galaxy's most brutal slave markets. Stone's jaw tightened as he watched the systematic destruction of an entire civilization. The Scarthok were efficient. He'd give them that. They had divided the planet's major continents into harvesting zones, using energy weapons to herd the population into collection points like cattle. Cities that had stood for millennia were burning, their smoke visible, even from orbit. You know what's really twisted about the slave trade? It's all about the bottom line. The Scarthok didn't destroy planets out of malice. They did it for profit. Children brought premium prices in the Outer Rim markets. Adults were sorted by species and physical capability. The elderly and infirm were simply ... discarded. It was genocide with accounting principles, and it made Stone's blood boil. "Population estimate?" Stone asked, his voice deadly quiet. "Pre-attack population was approximately 200,000, Jackson replied, consulting his sensors. "Current readings suggest they've already captured over 40,000 beings at their current rate." He paused, doing mental calculations that no military officers should ever have to make. "I'll strip the planet clean in another 8 hours." Stone felt something cold settle in his chest. 8 hours. In 8 hours, an entire species would be extinct, scattered across slave markets throughout the galaxy. Their children would grow up in chains, never knowing the world their parents had died trying to protect. Distance to the raiders? Stone asked. 12 million kilometers and closing, sir? They haven't detected us yet. Our stealth systems are holding. That was the one advantage humanity had developed during their violent expansion from Earth. While other species built massive, impressive warships designed to intimidate enemies, humans had learned to build ships that could appear anywhere, anytime, without warning. The defense fleet specialized in being invisible until the moment they chose to strike. Sir, Communications Officer Kelly Martinez called from her station, her face pale as she monitored the enemy transmissions. Dum-da-da-da-da! I'm picking up chatter from the raider ships. They're discussing which planets to hit next. There's a list, Admiral. It's dozens of worlds, all primitive civilizations. Stone's knuckles went white against the command rail. The Scarthok weren't just destroying Proxima 7. They were planning a campaign of systematic extermination across this entire sector. Species that had never developed space travel. Civilizations that couldn't defend themselves. Children who would never see their next birthday. Martinez opened a channel to the raider fleet, Stone ordered. Sir? Martinez looked confused. We maintain stealth and open the channel, Lieutenant. The response came almost immediately. The main screen flickered to life, revealing something that would haunt the dreams of every human who saw it. The Scarthok commander was massive, easily 3 meters tall, with 6 compound eyes that glittered like black diamonds. Its mandibles clicked and ground together as it spoke, producing a sound like breaking glass mixed with grinding metal. Unknown vessels, the creature hissed, its voice translated through the universal communication matrix. You trespass in Scarthok hunting grounds. These prey animals belong to us by right of conquest. Depart immediately, or you will join them. In our holds, the bridge fell silent. Everyone turned to look at Admiral Stone, waiting to see how humanity would respond to its first contact with an alien. Intelligence. Stone's smile was absolutely terrifying. It was the kind of smile that had made him famous throughout the Outer Rim colonies. Pirates called it the Stone Grin, the last thing many of them ever saw. It was the expression of a man who had spent 30 years fighting bullies and predators, and who had just found the biggest bully in the galaxy. This is Admiral Marcus, Stone of the Human Defense Fleet, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never backed down from a fight. You have 30 seconds to release every prisoner you've taken and surrender your vessels for inspection. Comply immediately, or I'll show you exactly why the galaxy calls us Deathworlders. The alien commander's mandibles spread in what might have been laughter. Humans. We have never heard of this species. You command only 18 vessels against our battle fleet. Your threats are amusing but irrelevant. Stone's smile grew wider, more predatory. Commander Jackson, battle stations. All ships, weapons hot. Let's give our new friends a proper introduction to human hospitality. Klaxons began wailing throughout the fleet as 18 of humanity's finest warships dropped their stealth. Fields and revealed themselves in all their deadly glory.
Ow.
The Scarthok commander's compound eyes widened as sensor readings flooded his screens, showing him something impossible. These human ships weren't just armed, they were loaded for bear, carrying enough firepower to crack planets, and they were accelerating directly toward his fleet with the kind of reckless abandon that spoke of either madness or absolute confidence. What the alien didn't understand was that he was facing the children of Earth, the only species in the galaxy that had evolved on a death world so hostile that simply surviving to adulthood required the reflexes of a predator and the heart of a warrior. The Scarthok. We're about to learn why peaceful species whispered humanity's name in the dark. War Master Krathvex had been the undisputed terror of the Outer Rim for over 3 decades. His biomechanical claws had personally torn the throats from the leaders of 17 civilizations. His ships had harvested over 4 million beings. For the slave markets, when lesser species heard his name whispered in the dark corners of space stations, they crossed themselves and prayed to whatever gods they worshipped. So, when these unknown humans issued their pathetic ultimatum, Krathvex did what any apex predator would do. He laughed. His arrogance lasted exactly 12 seconds. The human fleet's opening salvo shattered every assumption the Scarthok had about warfare. Instead of the elegant energy weapons favored by civilized species, the humans opened fire with something far more primitive and infinitely more terrifying solid. Projectiles moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The first railgun. Slug from the USS Vengeance struck Krathvek's flagship like the fist of an angry god. The tungsten penetrator, no larger than a baseball but moving at 30,000 kilometers per second, punched through the ship's bioarmor as if it were tissue paper. The kinetic energy release vaporized everything within a 50-meter radius of the impact point. Shield harmonics disrupted, screamed his weapons officer, a creature whose voice had never before carried fear. The projectiles are passing through our energy barriers. Krathvek stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The Scarthak had spent millennia perfecting energy absorption technology. Their living ships could drink laser fire like wine and convert plasma blasts into fuel for their biological systems. But these humans, these primitive mammals, were using chunks of metal accelerated too. Relativistic speeds. You want to know the difference between smart and clever? Smart builds better shields. Clever throws rocks really, really hard. Return. Fire! Krathvex roared, his mandibles dripping with fury. It showed these animals the power of the Scarthok. Ships unleashed torrents of bioplasma, streams of living fire that had melted entire cities. The energy beams reached out toward the human fleet like the tongues of hungry serpents, ready to consume these upstart mammals. The humans did something that defied every tactical manual in known space. They accelerated into the plasma streams, Captain. Lisa Rodriguez gripped the controls of her interceptor as Fox Squadron dove through a wall of superheated death. The temperature readings on her cockpit display climbed past the red line, past the safety margins, past the point where her fighter should have become a cloud of expanding gas. Fox leader, to all squadrons, she broadcasted. Her voice steady despite pulling 9 Gs that should have turned her brain to jelly. These bastards want to play with fire? Let's show them what Earth girls are made of. Her squadron followed her. Into hell itself, their fighters screaming through plasma that would have instantly vaporized any other species' aircraft. But humans had evolved on a world where survival meant adaptation, where weakness meant death, where only the most resilient genetic lines continued. Earth hadn't just created humanity. It had forged them in a crucible of violence that made them uniquely suited for war. Rodriguez locked onto the engine cluster of a Scarthak Raider and fired everything she had. This is for every child you monsters have stolen. The explosion lit up space like a miniature star as the alien ship's biological reactor core went critical. But Rodriguez was already moving, already hunting her next target, her fighter dancing. Through defensive fire, with the fluid grace of a predator in its element. On the bridge of his flagship, Krathvex watched his tactical display with growing horror. The human ships weren't just fighting, they were hunting. Each vessel moved with predatory intelligence, coordinating attacks with a precision that spoke of evolution on a world where pack hunting meant survival. Warmaster, his tactical officer, reported, his voice breaking with panic, "The humans are using primitive kinetic weapons, but their targeting systems are impossibly advanced. They're hitting us with surgical precision while moving at combat speed. Their pilots, added as flight coordinator, are pulling maneuvers that should kill them. Our biocomputers calculate a 97% chance of pilot death. From G-force trauma, but they're still flying?" What the Scarthok couldn't understand was that humans weren't just another species. They were the children of the galaxy's only known death world. Earth hadn't produced a civilization that happened to be good at war. It had produced warriors who had learned to build spaceships. The revelation hit Krathvex like a physical blow. These weren't the soft diplomatic species the Scarthok usually preyed upon. These were apex predators who had crawled to the top of the most hostile food chain in known space. "They're not retreating," his tactical officer screamed, his voice rising to a shriek that pierced even the chaos of battle. "Warmaster, they're ramming our vessels." Through the tactical display, Krathvex watched something that challenged his fundamental understanding of warfare. The human destroyer, USS Atlanta, her shields collapsed and hull breached in 17 places, was accelerating directly toward his heavy cruiser Flesh Render. The ship should have been retreating, should have been trying to preserve itself, and its crew. Instead, it was turning itself into a guided missile weighing 50,000 tons and moving at 12% of light speed. Captain. Robert Miller's voice crackled across all frequencies as the Atlanta bore down on her target. This is Captain Miller to all ships. Tell my wife I love her. Tell my kids their daddy did something that mattered. His voice hardened with absolute resolve. And tell these monsters that humans don't forget, and we sure as hell don't forgive. This is for every child you've stolen, you bastards. The collision was visible across the entire star system. Two massive warships, one human and one alien, met in an explosion that briefly outshone the local sun. The flesh render simply vanished, vaporized by the kinetic energy of a destroyer moving at relativistic speeds. The USS Atlanta died with her, but her sacrifice tore a hole in the Scarthok formation that the rest of the human fleet poured through like wolves through a gap in a fence. Krathvex felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 decades of conquest fear. Not the calculated concern of a tactical disadvantage, but the primal terror of a predator, suddenly realizing it had become prey. All ships withdraw to defensive positions, he commanded. Signal the reserve fleet. We need reinforcements. Even as he gave the orders, Krathvex knew it was too late. The humans had closed to knife-fighting range, and their ships were designed for exactly this kind of brutal, close-quarters combat. They moved through his formation like sharks through a school of fish, their weapon systems optimized for maximum destruction at minimum range. The War Master, who had conquered 17 star systems, watched his invincible fleet being systematically destroyed by 18 ships crewed by mammals, who treated impossible odds as a minor inconvenience. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Krathvex began to understand why the galaxy's ancient records contained warnings about something called Deathworlders. He was about to learn why those warnings had been written in the first place. What had started as a battle was rapidly becoming something far more personal, reckoning 3 centuries in the making. The Scarthok had built their empire on the screams of the innocent. Today, humanity had come to collect the bill. Stone stood motionless on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, watching his tactical display as his fleet tore through the enemy formation like a pack of wolves through sheep. But this wasn't mindless destruction. This was surgical precision guided by righteous fury. Every shot was calculated, every maneuver designed not just to destroy the enemy, but to save the thousands of prisoners trapped in their holds. Commander Jackson, Stone ordered, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I want precision strikes on their slave compartments. Cut through their hull plating, but leave the holding areas intact. Those people have suffered enough. I won't have them die because we were sloppy. Jackson's fingers danced across his tactical console, designating target points with the skill of a surgeon. Aye, sir. All ships, this is fire control. Target package, Alpha slave hold, liberation. Surgical strikes only. Anyone who puts a hole in a prisoner compartment gets to explain it to the Admiral personally. The threat was unnecessary. Every human in the fleet had seen the sensor readings, had watched the streams of transport pods carrying terrified beings up from the planet's surface. They knew what was at stake, and they knew that precision meant the difference between rescue and massacre. Lieutenant Jennifer Walsh pushed her gunship USS Fury through a storm of plasma fire that would have made veteran pilots soil themselves. But Walsh had grown up in the asteroid mining colonies, where a single mistake meant explosive decompression and death. Dodging alien weapons fire was just Tuesday for someone who had learned to fly in the most dangerous region of human space. This is Walsh to vengeance, she reported. Her voice steady, despite pulling maneuvers that were rewriting the book on combat flying. I've got visual on the primary slave hold. Admiral, you need to see this. The feed from Walsh's gun cameras appeared on Stone's main screen, and every person on the bridge felt their blood turn to ice. Through the transparent aluminum viewing ports of the Scarthok vessel, they could see the prisoners, thousands of them packed into compartments like cargo. Men, women, elderly beings, and worst of all, children. terrified youngsters clinging to their parents, their large eyes wide with fear as the battle raged around them. Stone's jaw clenched so hard his teeth should have cracked. His own daughter, Emma, would have been about the same age as some of those children. The memory of her laugh silenced forever by raiders who saw innocent lives as profit margins burned in his chest like molten steel. You know what separates humans from most species? We don't just get angry, we get even. Walsh, mark that ship. As Priority Alpha, Stone commanded. All boarding parties, prepare for combat insertion. We're going in. The Scarthok made their final fatal mistake at that moment. War Master Krathvex, desperate and cornered, opened a communication channel to the human fleet. His image appeared on Stone's screen, a nightmare of chitinous armor and compound eyes that reflected no mercy, no compassion, no recognition that the beings in his holds were anything more than property. "Humans," he hissed, his mandibles clicking with rage. "Withdraw immediately, or we will execute every slave in our holds. Their deaths will be on your conscience." The bridge of the Vengeance fell, absolutely silent. Every human officer, every crew member, every person who could hear that transmission felt something fundamental shift inside them. This wasn't just war anymore. This was a choice between the kind of species humanity would become. Stone's response was delivered in a voice so cold it could have frozen space itself. "Krathvex, you just made the last mistake of your miserable existence. All boarding parties, new rules of engagement, no quarter, no prisoners, no mercy for slavers." Captain Michael Torres was already suited up in his assault armor when the new orders came through. A 20-year veteran of the Marine Corps, he had seen action against pirates and raiders across the Outer Rim. But this was different. This was personal. Marines Torres addressed his boarding team as their assault craft screamed toward the Scarthok flagship. "You heard the Admiral? These monsters just threatened to murder children. Show 'em what happens when you threaten the innocent in front of humans." The assault craft hit the alien ship's hull with the force of a meteor, cutting through their bioarmor with plasma torches that burned at 50,000 degrees. The Marines poured through the breach like avenging angels, their powered armor turning them into walking tanks that could shrug off weapons fire that would vaporize unprotected humans. The Scarthok had built their reputation as fierce warriors by preying on defenseless civilizations. They had never faced an enemy that fought back with the coordinated fury of Earth's apex predators. Torres led his team through the ship's corridors with the methodical precision of someone who had trained for this moment his entire adult life. Behind him, 24 Marines moved in perfect formation, their weapon systems painting target locks on every Scarthok that dared show itself. "Resistance is heavy," reported Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, her assault rifle chewing through alien armor like paper. "These bugs don't want to give up their prize, and we'll have to take it from them," Torres replied, his voice distorted by his helmet's combat filter. "Breach the slave holds. Get those people out of here." The fighting was brutal and one-sided. The Scarthok were individually larger and stronger than humans. But humanity had learned something during their violent evolution, that their enemies had never mastered teamwork. While the aliens fought as individuals, the Marines moved as a single organism, covering each other's advances and creating overlapping fields of fire that turned the ship's corridors into killing zones. Torres found War Master Krathvex in his command chamber, surrounded by the trophies of his conquests, the preserved heads of leaders from 17 different worlds, the jeweled weapons of defeated warriors, the recorded screams of his victims. It was a monument to 3 decades of systematic cruelty. The alien commander was massive, easily 3 meters tall and covered in biomechanical armor that pulsed with organic energy. His compound eyes glittered with the kind of intelligence that made him even more monstrous. He knew exactly what he had done, and he had enjoyed every moment of it. "Human," Krathvex hissed, raising weapons that had personally killed thousands. "You think your primitive species can challenge the might of the Scarthok? I have conquered 17 star systems. I have harvested millions of slaves. I am death incarnate." Torres removed his helmet, letting the alien see his face, the face of humanity's judgment. "You made one mistake, Bug. You threatened children in front of their protectors. The final confrontation lasted less than 10 seconds. Krathvex was skilled, experienced, and equipped with weapons that could cut through steel. But Torres was something the War Master had never encountered, a human father who had just heard someone threaten to murder kids. When the smoke cleared, the most feared slaver in the galaxy was nothing more than a bad memory scattered across his trophy room. Torres stood over the remains, his assault rifle still smoking, and activated his comm system. "Admiral, this is Torres. Target eliminated. The children are safe. 8. Stone's voice came back immediately, carrying a satisfaction that went bone deep. "Outstanding work, Captain. Bring our people home." But even as victory was declared, even as the rescued prisoners were evacuated to safety, everyone in the human fleet knew that this was just the beginning. Word of humanity's intervention would spread across the galaxy. Like wildfire, and the universe would learn that Earth's children didn't just fight wars, they finished them. 2 weeks after the Battle of Proxima 7, something unprecedented was happening across the galaxy. The story was spreading faster than light-speed communications, carried by traders, diplomats, and refugees who had witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the universe. Captain Sarah Thompson stood on the rebuilt ceremonial platform in the center of New Morcata City, watching as the last human transport prepared to leave orbit. Around her, the alien children who had survived the Scarthok harvesting played games with her engineering crew, their laughter echoing across streets that had been silent graveyards. Just 14 days earlier, the reconstruction had been a miracle of human efficiency and alien gratitude working in perfect harmony. Thompson's engineers had worked 18-hour shifts alongside the survivors, rebuilding not just structures, but hope itself. Power grids that had been shattered by plasma bombardment now hummed with renewed energy. Schools that had been converted into slave processing centers were once again filled with the sound of young voices learning about their world's history. Elder. Mordok approached Thompson with the slow, dignified pace of someone who had lived through the worst imaginable nightmare and emerged to see salvation arrive from the stars. His scaled face, marked by the ritual scars of his people's leadership class, bore the tracks of tears that had flowed freely since the moment human Marines had cut the locks from his people's prison cells. "Captain Thompson," he said carefully, practice standard, his voice carrying the weight of genuine bewilderment. "Before you leave, I must ask the question that haunts my dreams. Why did your people come? We had never met humans before. We had no trade agreements, no diplomatic treaties, no mutual defense pacts. We were complete strangers separated by the vast emptiness of space." Thompson knelt down to the level of a group of young Morcadans who had been clinging to her uniform for the past hour. They had appointed themselves her personal honor guard, following her everywhere with the absolute trust that only children can give to someone who represents safety in a dangerous universe. "Elder," she replied, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had spent her career making impossible decisions. "Someone sent out a call for help, and we heard it. That's all there is to it. When decent people hear someone screaming in the dark, they turn on the lights and go see what's wrong." The simplicity of her answer hit Mordok like a physical blow. In a galaxy where every interaction was calculated for advantage, where species formed alliances based on resource extraction rights and trade route access, the humans had risked their lives for strangers simply because it was the right thing to do. You want to know what's funny about doing the right thing? It's usually the hardest choice available. But Thompson's answer revealed something profound about humanity that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. These weren't conquerors seeking new territory or traders looking for profitable markets. These were protectors who had evolved on a world so hostile that cooperation and mutual aid weren't just virtues, they were survival strategies. Word of humanity's intervention had already reached the farthest corners of known space. Carried by hyperspace communication networks that connected thousands of civilizations, the story grew with each telling, but the core facts remained unchanged. An unknown species had heard a distress call from complete strangers and had responded with overwhelming military force, asked for nothing in return, and had rebuilt an entire civilization out of pure altruism in the crystal spires of the Galactic Senate on Alpha Centauri Prime. Emergency sessions had been running continuously for 10 standard days. Representatives from over 400 species gathered in chambers that had hosted diplomatic discussions for 3 millennia, all trying to understand what humanity's emergence meant for the existing balance of power. Ambassador Kelleth of the Andromedan Trade Federation stood before the assembled delegates, her crystalline form resonating with harmonic frequencies that translated as barely contained excitement. Honored colleagues, we are witnessing the emergence of a species that operates outside every paradigm we understand. The humans possess military technology that allowed 18 ships to destroy a Scarthak raider fleet that should have been impossible to defeat. Yet they used that power not for conquest, but for rescue. Senator Vrex of the Rigel Corporate Collective. A species that measured every interaction, in terms of profit margins and resource acquisition, raised a tentacled appendage in confusion. But what did they gain? What was their angle? There must have been some strategic advantage we're not seeing. Ambassador Kelleth's harmonic laughter filled the chamber. That's exactly the point, Senator. It gained nothing except the knowledge that an innocent species continues to exist. They asked for no tribute, demanded no territorial concessions, established no trade agreements. They simply ... helped. The concept was so alien to galactic politics that several delegates required medical attention to process the cognitive dissonance. But while diplomats debated humanity's motives in air-conditioned chambers, a very different conversation was taking place in the darkest corners of the galaxy. In hidden bases scattered across lawless systems, every pirate captain, slaver, cartel, and raider clan was receiving the same chilling intelligence reports. The humans were real, they were powerful, and they had made it abundantly clear that they considered the protection of innocent life to be a non-negotiable principle. Vorg the Enslaver, whose ships had terrorized the Outer Rim for 40 years, stared at the tactical analysis with hands that trembled for the first time since his youth. 18 ships destroyed 3 Scarthak heavy raiders. That's impossible. Krathvex was the most successful war master in known space. His intelligence officer, a nervous creature whose species specialized in information brokerage, consulted his datapad with obvious fear. The reports are consistent across all sources, sir. The humans used kinetic weapons that bypass Scarthak, energy shields. Their pilots pulled maneuvers that should have been lethal, and their ground forces. Sir, they boarded enemy vessels and fought the Scarthak hand-to-hand. Successfully. The implications were staggering. If humans could defeat the Scarthak in close combat, no raider fleet in the galaxy was safe. The delicate ecosystem of predators and prey that had defined galactic crime for centuries had been shattered by the emergence of apex predators, who fought for moral principles rather than profit. Captain James Parker stood on the bridge of the USS Guardian, a patrol vessel now assigned to monitor the border regions where human space interfaced with the wider galaxy. His ship was one of 50 vessels now broadcasting the same message on all known communication frequencies. In every major galactic language, this is Captain Parker of the Human Defense Fleet, his voice carried across space with the authority of an entire civilization behind it. To any who would prey upon the innocent, enslave the helpless, or harm those who cannot defend themselves, know this: we are watching, we are listening, and we will find you. The message was simple, direct, and absolutely terrifying to anyone who made their living from the suffering of others. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy not as conquerors or traitors, but as something far more dangerous, as protectors with the power to enforce their protection. The age of human isolation was over. The galaxy's apex predators had taken their place among the stars. No, they had made it clear that the universe now had a new set of rules. For the innocent, it was the dawn of a new age of hope. And for those who preyed upon the innocent, it was the beginning of a very short countdown. To judgment, the Deathworlders had arrived. And they brought with them something the galaxy had almost forgotten: justice. The end.